Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to have a little chat about Warhammer Legends, because the 40k stuff is now available on the community site. I will link it in the description, obviously, and we're going to have a little chat about, essentially, just whether it's a good system or not, whether it works, whether it is as clear and comprehensive as it could be, whether there's a bit of room there for confusion. There is. And just whether overall it's a positive thing. Now, I will say that, to be honest, for the most part, I think it is a positive thing. The fact is that as time goes on and as new codexes come out and as new products are released, some stuff just falls behind. It gets left behind. It is no longer supported the way it was, and in the case of some units, it was never really fully supported in terms of model releases anyway. A big chunk of the stuff that was put into Warhammer Legends is Space Marines on bikes. Things like the Librarian on bike, Chaplain on bike, Tech Marine on bike, Company Agent on bike. Is it Company Veterans on bikes as well? Those are gone. Now that is obviously extra sucky if you are, for instance, a White Scars player, because that feels like a decent chunk of your army is now being moved into we're never going to see this again territory. Which, to be fair, is a valid way of looking at it. I'm not going to say, oh, you're getting rules, you should be happy about this. It's never nice to see something that you've worked on for so long become maybe not irrelevant now, but to know that there will be a point where that stuff is not supported in any way. It's not going to be improved on, it's not going to be changed. And that's a big part of Warhammer Legends, is the fact that the costs and values that they have, those are set in stone. They are not going to be revised as part of chapter approved or anything like that. They are how they are, and that's how they're going to be, effectively, forever, until those rules themselves are no longer applicable to whatever edition of 40k we are in. Now, I'd hope that, should all the rumours of 9th edition show up and actually turn out to be true, that the stuff from Legends will port over to that. That would be the best way to do it, I think. We'll have to wait and see. But in terms of just things that are going to definitely be revisited in the future, the stuff in there, it's kind of unlikely. What we have now is what those units will be like pretty much forever. The thing is, I don't think it's necessarily a massive slap in the face. It would be very easy for Games Workshop to just not bother. And in fact, if I'm honest, I would probably have assumed that would be the position to take with a lot of this stuff. I mean, yes, it does invalidate people's armies if you just stop making rules for things, if you just don't acknowledge that anything's changed, if you don't say, okay, here you go, here's the last bunch of rules, no more. You can get to the point where things just don't become relevant anymore. It'd be very easy, for instance, to just say in the next, the next codex release, anything in the indexes or in previous codexes is now null and void, only this stuff is applicable. That's not going to happen now, because they put all this stuff into the Legend system, and therefore that stuff is applicable to, narrative, open, matched. This is stuff that you can use for every type of game that you want to have. They didn't have to do that, and in fact, I would argue that not that long ago they wouldn't have bothered. We have the instances of things like Bretonnia and Tomb Kings. We have instances of entire armies just ceasing to exist, no longer being relevant. An example I come back to fairly often is the 13th Company that were in the Eye of Terror Codex way back when. That was one of my armies, 13th Company, and that just wasn't a thing. I took a break from 40k for a little bit, I came back and, sorry, that's just not valid. That's not anything. Yeah, you could use those models in a normal Space Wolf army, but I didn't want a normal Space Wolves army. I wanted a 13th Company army, and the things that made that force kind of unique no longer applied, which sucked. But that isn't what's going to happen to a lot of the units in Legends now. It's not a perfect system, and it's not a way to thoroughly and completely escape your army falling out of use, but it's still better than now. And not that long ago, you probably would have gotten out. Now, there are some confusing points about it, to be fair. As a few people have pointed out, some stuff that's in that big bulk of rules for models that are either no longer applicable, no longer available, or just weren't available in the first place. You do have stuff that was also kind of addressed in Chapter Approved. There are a few crossover points, which is a little bit odd, and kind of makes you wonder if the people doing Chapter Approved were talking to the people who were putting the stuff in for Warhammer Legends. Similarly, it's kind of suggested, or at least the way that it's phrased, is that they don't want these models to fall out of use. They don't want these models to just sit on the shelves and do nothing. They want these models to be usable for people, to still be, relevant to the tabletop. And so here are your rules. Some of the models that are now part of Warhammer Legends are still just available for sale. Now, the way that it was phrased originally, and the way that it kind of seemed to tie in with when they did it for Age of Sigmar, was it was stuff that you cannot buy anymore, that no longer really has support, that rather than just disappear entirely, here you go. Here's some rules for them. You can use them forever. Legion of the Damned is one of the things in Warhammer Legends, and yet their models are just openly available, which is not a problem. It's just a little confusing, because you've got this big long list of stuff that isn't a thing, or wasn't a thing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure, the Chaplain on bike, I'm 90% sure that was a thing that you could just get. And I think, if I remember correctly, yeah, there was a White Scars Captain on bike, or at least like a conversion kit, was it? One of the two. Tech Marine on bike wasn't really a thing that existed, as far as I remember, and I don't think Apothecary did either. There's stuff in there that was definitely the realm of conversions. Especially talking about things like the War Boss in Mega Armor. That, I don't think, has ever had an actual model. It's just been something that's available, and you convert it either from Ghazghkull, or you could maybe do it out of... Actually, everyone I knew who played Orcs always just converted out of Ghazghkull, back when, anyway. Now, of course, you've got plenty of options, but not so much when I was playing Orcs. A lot of this stuff is stuff that was not really officially supported, or just hasn't had a model available for ages. But then you have things that are still being produced. You have models that are still available, that you can still buy, but for some reason, they're not actually applicable outside of this kind of legacy rule set, whereby this is how they are now and will forever be, because we're not going to look at them ever again. That feels a little bit weird, because it feels like models that are still being produced, models that are still being made, that are still available for sale, should have actual full support, not just this kind of, here you go, here's the stuff that you need, and yeah, we're not going to look at it again. That feels a little bit odd. That feels a bit strange. There's also like weird inconsistencies in terms of effects of like melt weapons on vehicles, for instance. I believe, if I remember correctly, is it the Land Raider? One of the Land Raider variants doesn't just explode if the plasma gun overheats, but the Rhino still does. I'm pretty sure that's what I read when I was glancing through them all earlier. And that's a weird inconsistency, and that's something that should probably have been addressed. It's little things like that. I think it's a decent system. I think it's something that is actually going to keep a lot of stuff usable, whereas otherwise it would have been easy to just get rid of it completely. But it's not 100% consistent. And it does carry with it the unfortunate fact that if your stuff is in there, it's probably not going to get looked at again. And even when you're providing the rules for people to have a look, like to actually be able to use this stuff for the foreseeable future, it's never nice having confirmation that the thing that you want to use, the thing that you've put time and effort into, is not going to be officially supported outside of a narrow scope of, here you go, that's all you get. It's kind of a way of confirming that something you own is no longer part of what Games Workshop is interested in. It's no longer part of what Games Workshop is going to focus on supporting. They're giving you the support right now, and that support will technically just be ongoing. But it's never going to be revisited. You're not going to see updated versions of those. In the case of things like Space Marines on bike, I think we will probably see a replacement for that. Space Marine bikes will most likely be replaced by some sort of Primaris variant, most likely some sort of hover bike. And that's fine for those who like Primaris, but it's not going to be the same for those who don't. It's not going to be something that replaces all those different HQs on bike. It's not going to be something that that has the same emotional attachment. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's a compromise. It's a better compromise than we would have got quite a while ago. It does unfortunately mean some stuff is not going to be looked at again. But on the other hand, it also means that there is stuff that could have just disappeared without a trace, that could have been made completely irrelevant and could have been essentially forgotten to the extent that you could never use them again. And that hasn't happened. There is at least some form of support there, and they are still in some way usable. Maybe not quite the way you'd want them to be, but they are, which is better than nothing. So yeah, that's, go and have a look at it, take a glance through, see what jumps out at you as things are like, oh, I really wish they'd actually supported that for longer. See if you can take a look and corroborate for me stuff that was available as a model and stuff that you had to convert for yourself, because my memory's hazy on exactly which things were never a thing and which things were but then went out of production. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below, as always. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all of that. And of course, there's always the affiliate link in the description for Element Games. Go there, through the link, buy stuff that you were going to buy anyway. I get a little something for sending you that way. And you save a bunch of money, and 10% of whatever you spend goes to charity at the end of the month. So it's a nice way to support the channel and also do a little bit extra. You can do that if you'd like. It's entirely up to you. I'll see you for the next one. Toodaloo.